The Courtesan Spy of Constantinople Part 2. Chapter 13, Loyalties Burn. Ottoman encampment, midday, day of the siege. The sun rose blood-red above the Bosphorus. The final day had begun. Throughout the camp, soldiers oiled blades, repainted banners, and murmured prayers to gods who would not hear them. The walls of Constantinople stood faintly in the distance, ghost-like through the morning haze, so close, yet steeped in centuries of blood, myth, and stubborn defiance. By sunset, they would either fall or burn. Helena stood just outside General Semmel's tent, the heat of the brazier scorching her bare arms, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on the ridge beyond, where smoke curled upward in signal bursts, coded flashes passed between commanders and siege crews. It had begun, and every minute that passed was a countdown to ruin. Inside the tent, Semmel was preparing for war. Not in the way the others did, not with shouts or bravado, but with quiet precision. He rolled up maps, burned duplicate orders. He'd coated documents in oilcloth and slid them into the soles of his boots. "Do you still believe in the cause?" Helena asked from the entrance. He didn't look up. "I believe in the fire," he said, "but not the hand that lit it." She stepped in slowly. "Then why still serve him?" Semmel finally looked up. "I made an oath. Even a false one still brands." He walked toward her, sword-belted, expression unreadable. Helena held her ground. "There's another option," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Betray him," she whispered. "Burn the order. Collapse the breach. Let the city stand." He stared at her. Long. Hard. "You're asking me," he said slowly, "to become the thing I swore I'd never be again." "No," she said. "I'm asking you to finish what you started." She pulled something from beneath her sash, a copy of the revised breach map. Drawn from memory. Ink still fresh. "I made this last night," she said. "This is what your army doesn't know I saw. But it's not mine anymore. It's ours." Semmel looked at the map. Then her. And something dark and resolute clicked into place. "Then we'll burn it together." That afternoon, they enacted the plan. Helena dressed in her finest gown, red silk, Ottoman lace, eyes rimmed in kohl. She was to attend the Sultan's final war blessing. The Sultan always blessed the siege in person. Surrounded by generals. By fire. By symbol. She would be the distraction. Semmel would use it to slip away. To light the false signal fires. To send Mehmed's elite forces into the wrong breach. And when the breach collapsed, sabotaged by Semmel himself, they would believe the city had betrayed them. And turn inward. Collapse the invasion from within. But war never goes as planned. As Helena approached the Sultan's pavilion, flanked by 2 guards and trailing the scent of lotus oil, a shadow blocked her path. Iskender. The Sultan's chamberlain. The man who had once drawn blood sigils across her collarbone at the Gate of Blood. He studied her now with narrowed eyes. "You have changed," he said softly. Helena smiled. "So has the wind." He stepped forward. His fingers grazed the hilt of his dagger. "And wind," he whispered, "can shift a flame or kill it." He gestured for the guards to seize her. But before they could, Semmel arrived. Armor half-worn, cloak dragging behind him, sword unsheathed. "This one walks with me," he said. Iskender's eyes narrowed. "You forget your station. And you forget your place," Semmel snapped. "If I am to bleed today, I choose who stands at my side." They held each other's gaze. Long enough for the tension to crack the air. Then Iskender stepped aside. "Let her walk then," he said softly. "Let her fall beside you." Helena's heart pounded in her ribs. But she followed Semmel, saying nothing. Only when they were alone behind the tent did he turn to her. "Change of plans," he whispered. "What happened?" "They moved the fires. The real breach is happening at the cistern beneath the Emperor's Gate." Her blood ran cold. "That's where the children are sheltered." "I know," he said. "And then? We light the fire there, or we lose everything." They stood on the edge of war, dressed in silk and steel, about to betray the most powerful man in the East. Because their loyalties were not to crowns anymore. Not to empires. Only to each other. Only to what must not burn. Chapter 14, Confession on the Eve of Fire. Ottoman encampment, dusk, the last hour before the siege. The sky burned gold over the Bosphorus. The third call to prayer had ended. The moon, unseen, hung somewhere behind the clouds. And Constantinople, old, cracked, stubborn Constantinople, waited on the edge of oblivion. Helena sat at the base of a fig tree just beyond the ridge of the camp, fingers stained with ink, lips dry. Below her, the city's silhouette trembled in the distance, lit by torchlight and trembling with the soft, distant groan of siege machines. Every part of her body ached. from the wound still weeping beneath her dress to the betrayal twisting like iron in her gut. She was no longer just a spy. No longer just a widow. Not even Fatima anymore. She was what happens when loyalty dies and something worse takes its place. Semel found her alone. He didn't speak right away. He sat beside her, his sword sheathed, his armor stripped away. No cloak. No helmet. Just him. A man with no name left. A general without a war. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Helena asked, "Do you remember who you were before all this?" He nodded. Slowly. "Yes." "Do you hate him?" He turned to her, his voice low. "I miss him." She swallowed hard. "I remember the woman I was," she said. "Before the blood. Before the veil. Before they turned my husband into a message." Semel looked at her gently. "Who was she?" Helena smiled faintly. "She had hope." He didn't answer. He reached into his tunic and pulled something from a hidden pocket. A small coin. Byzantine. Tarnished silver. He pressed it into her hand. "I took this the day they renamed me," he said. "Kept it to remind myself I wasn't theirs." She curled her fingers around it. Then, softly, "You saved me." "No," he said. "You reminded me I still wanted to be saved." Their faces were inches apart now. She saw the lines near his mouth. The scar under his eye. The bruise darkening along his collarbone. And she saw something else. The war behind his eyes. "I was sent here to end you," she whispered. "To seduce you. Spy on you. Poison you if needed." "I know," he said. "I was told to kill any spy caught in my tent." "So why didn't you?" "Because you didn't flinch when you bled." A pause. A long, slow silence full of breaths not taken. Then Helena leaned forward and kissed him. Not like a woman playing a part. Not like a widow clinging to warmth. But like someone choosing something at the end of everything. Semel kissed her back. And for a single moment, there was no war. No blood. No betrayal. Only them. Two ruins holding each other before the storm. When they pulled apart, her voice shook. "Are you still ready?" "Yes," he said. "Then we light the fire." They rose together. No banners. No armor. No title. Just a pact. To betray the empire that owned them both. To save the city that didn't even know they still believed in it. And to burn a hole in history wide enough for the truth to crawl through. Chapter 15, The Lovers' Pact. Beneath the cisterns, the last hour before the breach. The tunnels beneath Constantinople were older than myth. Once carved by Roman hands, then fortified by Byzantine masons, the cistern corridors now groaned with age, water dripping from cracks, rats skittering between support beams, the stones slick with moss and secrets. And now they would host a betrayal. Helena moved through the darkness with silent steps, a torch in one hand, her other wrapped in Semel's. They were not dressed as lovers anymore. She wore charcoal black linens tightly bound to her body, a dagger at her waist. He wore the plain uniform of a low-ranking Ottoman sapper, armorless, unnoticed. Perfect camouflage. Above them, war prepared to descend. Below, they would strike first. They reached the breach chamber just before the demolition crew arrived. Semel had ordered the shift delayed by 30 minutes, citing unstable stone integrity. A lie, of course, but his seal still carried weight, even now. The chamber was wide, low-ceilinged, reinforced with rotting beams and stacked with kegs of black powder. It was here the Ottomans planned to blast through the foundations of the Emperor's Gate. And when the city's defenders rushed to hold the breach, they would be ambushed by waiting janissaries flooding through the side tunnels. That was the plan. The plan they would now destroy. Semel began inspecting the barrels. "There are 20, he said. "Enough to shatter the entire gate and bring down the corridor above." "Which ones do we sabotage?" "None," he said. "We light them all." Helena turned to him sharply. "What?" "If we only sabotage, someone will correct it. If we light them all before the breach, we bury the breach itself." She stared at him. "You'll be killing your own men." His jaw tightened. "I told them the breach was unstable. I told them not to enter before the signal. If they ignore that." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. They both knew no one would believe a traitor's warning anyway. She knelt beside one of the barrels and began uncoiling the fuse line. Semel moved beside her, preparing the oilcloths. They worked fast. Efficient. Like they'd done this 100 times. Like they were born for sabotage. But neither spoke. Until the silence broke. Helena paused, holding the torch just inches from the fuse. "What happens after?" she asked. Semel looked at her. "You and I," she said, "when this burns, what do we become?" He stepped close. Rested a hand on her cheek. "Free," he said. If we live, and if we don't? He pressed his forehead to hers. Then we die ourselves. They kissed, this time not in desperation but in promise. Not for survival. Not for comfort. But because this was the last moment before history would turn its head and never look back. Helena stood. Semel soaked the fuses. He turned to her, handed her the torch. You started this, he said softly. You finish it. She nodded. Took the torch. Lit the first fuse. The hiss of fire echoed like a serpent in the dark. Then another. And another. 3 sparks racing toward 20 barrels of black death. They turned. And ran. Behind them, the chamber lit gold. Then white. Then, boom. The tunnel shook. Stone cracked. A wave of dust and heat chased them like the breath of a god. They dove through a side passage just before the chamber collapsed behind them, sealing the breach with fire and ruin. Dozens would die. The Emperor's Gate would never open. The Janissaries, waiting in the wrong tunnel, would be slaughtered in confusion. And Constantinople, at least for one more night, would stand. They emerged from the tunnel near a dried-out aqueduct, breathless, bloodied, trembling with ash. Semel turned to her, laughing, mad, wild, breathless. Helena laughed too. Not from joy, but from the madness of defying 2 empires in one breath. They had done it. They had made a pact. And now they had blood on both their hands. Chapter 16, The Fire Beneath the Moon. Ottoman encampment, night of the siege. The new moon hung like a secret above the battlefield. Black. Hidden. Watching. And beneath it chaos bloomed. The first breach never came. The third call to prayer echoed across the hills, but no signal fire lit the Emperor's Gate. No thunder of crumbling stone followed. Instead, confusion twisted through the Ottoman ranks like a knife in the dark. Soldiers murmured. Officers barked contradictory orders. Siege crews stared at empty sky, waiting for a cue that never came. And then the ground shook. A blast split the earth near the western aqueduct. Fire bloomed from underground like the mouth of hell yawning open. A plume of smoke and flame erupted into the night, visible for miles. Their breach was gone. And the war turned inward. Helena and Semel lay beneath a broken aqueduct, breathless, faces streaked with ash and sweat, watching the sky catch fire. You did it, she whispered, voice raw. No, Semel said. We did. Below them, the camp was unraveling. Squadrons scrambled to regroup. Commanders shouted over one another. In the confusion, the Janissaries, who had been waiting to storm the Emperor's Gate, rushed forward prematurely and collided with reinforcements retreating from the smoking tunnel system. Steel met steel. Ottoman turned on Ottoman. Panic took hold. And in the center of it all, the Sultan's fire signal never came. But the Sultan did. From the upper ridge, Mehmed appeared on horseback, surrounded by his elite guard, his silhouette backlit by flame. His eyes blazed with fury as he watched his precision-planned assault disintegrate into smoke and betrayal. Then he pointed. At Semel's sector. At the one breach that hadn't opened. And he spoke one word. Treason. Semel's mark was now made. And Helena's. Their names, whatever they had once been, were gone. Now they were ghosts branded in fire. We have to move, Semel said, gripping her hand. Now. Where? To the city. Through the merchant tunnels. We reach the wall. Find the gate. You deliver the map. I hold the line. No, Helena snapped. You're not dying for a city that doesn't even know you exist. He touched her cheek gently. I'm not dying for a city, he said. I'm dying for what it should have been. She gripped his hand tighter. Then we go together. They ran through a world on fire. Past soldiers blinded by smoke. Past couriers screaming for clarity. Past Ottoman officers stabbing one another over the false reports flying between camps. Their betrayal had split the army. Now they had one chance to escape. One gate. One path. And one heartbeat between them. They reached the Merchant's Trail at dawn, a narrow tunnel just outside the vineyard gates once used to smuggle wine and coin into the city. Helena paused at the edge. Turned to Semel. Once we go through, she said, we don't stop. He nodded. And if they find us? Then we take as many down as we can before we fall. They kissed, this time without urgency. Just purpose. Then vanished into the stone. And behind them, the moonless sky wept smoke. As an empire screamed for blood. Chapter 17, The Betrayal That Followed. The merchant tunnels beneath Constantinople dawn. The tunnel walls dripped with time. Ancient stone, slick with condensation, smelled of salt and dust, centuries of trade and treachery soaked into its bones. Helena moved with one hand grazing the wall for balance, the other clasped tightly to Semel's. The sound of war was muffled here. A dull percussion from above, like gods throwing stones at the sky. But it wasn't over. Not even close. They emerged just before sunrise into the underbelly of Constantinople, beneath the spice quarter, where the city's labyrinth of cellars and forgotten cisterns converged into a vault once used by smugglers and dissenters. Now it was their only way in. Semel paused at a rusted gate. From here, we head to the north wall. I know a vault chamber that opens just above the cistern tower. Helena nodded. It connects to the Emperor's chapel. He looked at her with something close to pride. You knew the escape path before you ever stepped into my tent. She held his gaze. And you were always meant to be my enemy. But you weren't mine, he said. And that was the truth that broke her. They moved through the vaults quickly. Helena led now, the city familiar to her in a way no map could ever mimic. They passed columns blackened by fire, carved arches scrawled with prayers in 10 languages, skeletons of rebels chained to ancient walls. When they reached the upper cistern gate, Helena pulled the last coded message from her sash, a new map. Not the one from Semel's camp, but the version she'd drawn after the sabotage. It held the updated troop deployments, the failed breach routes, the names of the Ottoman generals likely to be blamed for the failure. It was more than a message. It was a weapon. If she could get it to the city guard, the Empire could strike before the next wave regrouped. The battle could shift. The impossible could happen. But first, they had to get inside the city. They reached the cistern exit just as the bells of Hagia Sophia rang, fractured, frantic. And that's when it happened. A shout behind them. Steel against stone. They turned and saw him. Iskender. The Sultan's chamberlain. Not dead. Not fooled. Not alone. 6 soldiers flanked him. 2 carried scimitars. 1 bore a longbow already drawn. And Iskender smiled. Well, he said in perfect Greek. The ghost general and his widow courtesan. How poetic. Helena stepped in front of Semel. Only one of us is dying here, she said coldly. Iskender nodded. You. He raised his hand. The archer fired. Semel moved, but not fast enough. The arrow tore into his side, just beneath the ribs. He staggered. Helena screamed and caught him, dragging him backward into the shadows. Go, Semel gasped. Deliver it, go it. She kissed his forehead. Then drew her dagger. Not without you. She turned to Iskender and threw the blade. It sank into his shoulder. He hissed in pain. The distraction was enough. Helena grabbed the broken pulley line on the wall, pulled with all her strength, and the counterweight above snapped free, dropping a section of stone gate down between them and their attackers. They were cut off. But Semel was bleeding. Fast. She dragged him into the chapel vault, bolting the door behind them. His blood stained her palms, her chest, the floor. I'm fine, he lied. She cradled him. You are many things, she whispered, but never a good liar. He laughed, then coughed blood. And she knew. He wouldn't survive the climb. So she made him swear. When the gate falls, she said, you disappear. You vanish. You don't die in this city. He gripped her wrist. And you don't let it fall. They kissed again. The last time. Then she took the map, pressed it to her chest, and slipped into the stairwell, leaving behind the only man who had ever truly seen her. Chapter 18, The Emperor's Demand. Hagia Sophia, Inner Chambers, Constantinople, dawn of the final day. The great doors of the Hagia Sophia thundered shut behind her like the closing of a tomb. Helena stood in the narthex, blood streaked down her arm, her dress torn at the hem. The coded map was hidden inside the lining of her corset, pressed so tightly to her ribs she could feel its heartbeat through the parchment. Priests ran in every direction, robes soaked with wine and sweat. Incense smoke hung low, suffocating. Mothers clutched children. Scholars huddled over relics they wouldn't live long enough to protect. The city's last sanctuary had become a cage of desperation. The siege had failed for now, but Constantinople was dying anyway. And the man who ruled its ashes still sat on the throne. She was escorted through a side door by a priest who recognized her not as Helena nor Fatima but only as the one who came from the tunnels. He brought her into a private chamber near the emperor's quarters, high above the nave. Gold icons shimmered against cracked walls. Mosaic saints stared down in judgment. And beneath them, seated in heavy robes lined with silk and sorrow, was Emperor Constantine XI. He looked thinner than she remembered. Grayed at the temples. His crown slightly tilted. But his voice was still iron. Your name, he said. Helena Saranduros, she answered. Widow of Niketas Sarandiros. Spy for the resistance. He nodded slowly. And what have you brought me, Helena of Ashes? She stepped forward, removed the bloodied outer layer of her dress, and unstitched the hem. Then placed the map before him. The emperor leaned forward. Read in silence. Then once more. Then folded the parchment and placed it into a black box beside his desk. You've done what no man inside these walls could, he said. Then act on it, Helena said. Strike the Janissaries while they're scattered. Attack the sappers before they regroup. They've turned on each other outside the Emperor's gate. Use it. He stared at her. And then he did the one thing she feared most. He hesitated. We are not ready, Constantine said. Yes, she snapped. You are. You've been waiting to be. And now it's here. He looked away. And in that moment, she understood. He wasn't weak. He was already grieving. I've seen the inside of Mehmed's war tent, she said. I've stood in the fire he calls destiny. And I've bled for both thrones. You are not fighting a man, you are fighting history. And history is terrified of being rewritten. Constantine closed his eyes. When he opened them, his voice had changed. Colder. Clearer. Then help me burn that history. She left the chamber with full military authority. Given no title. No oath. Just orders. To coordinate with the Eastern Quarter Guard. To strike before sunset. To bleed the fractured Ottoman army while they searched for scapegoats and traitors. It wasn't hope. It wasn't salvation. But it was a fight. She descended the steps into the basilica, moving through crowds of weeping citizens, broken soldiers, and dying priests. And as the morning light pierced the great dome above, casting gold across her blood-streaked skin, she realized what Semel had meant. She wasn't saving the city. She was becoming it. Not its past. Its reckoning. Chapter 19, The Ghost in Chains. Western walls of Constantinople, sunset day of the siege. They dragged him like a carcass. Semel Aldin, general, traitor, ghost, was hauled through the rubble of the collapsed breach by 3 Ottoman guards, his arms bound in rusted chain, his face streaked with blood and ash. His left eye was swollen shut. One leg dragged. A rib cracked every time he inhaled. But he was alive. And that was the problem. Alive meant useful. Alive meant visible. Alive meant Mehmed's wrath had a name. They chained him to a post in the very crater he had collapsed, iron buried in the shattered remnants of his own betrayal. The soldiers spat at him. Some cursed. One young officer, face full of fury and confusion, simply whispered, "Why?" Semel didn't answer. What was there to say? He had given his loyalty. His sword. His soul. And then he had given it to the right side. For the first time. Now he would die for it. And maybe that was how the debt would balance. From the far ridge, Sultan Mehmed watched the scene unfold from horseback, his black robes stirring in the rising wind. He didn't scream. Didn't rage. He simply raised a single hand. The signal was given. Execution at dawn. Let the city see its traitor. Let the name Semel Aldin die in dirt. Let the lesson be carved in blood. Helena heard the news at the eastern barracks. She was giving orders to the commander of the wall guard when a boy sprinted in with ash-covered boots and a face white with horror. They found him, he gasped. The general. They have him at the breach. Chained. The room fell silent. Helena didn't move for a moment. Then, how long? Until first light. She turned to the commander. You have the map. You know what to do. He hesitated. You won't lead it? No, she said. And didn't explain. She changed clothes. No silk. No armor. A black tunic stolen from the guard's laundry. A dagger, long and thin, strapped at the small of her back. The silver pendant Semel had once pressed into her hand now hung from her throat, burning cold against her skin. She moved through the back alleys of the city like a shadow, slipping through checkpoints, ducking patrols, crossing over the collapsed aqueduct line. No one stopped her. No one could have. She reached the ridge above the breach by nightfall. The crater glowed faintly, lit by dying torches and resentment. And there he was. Chained. Head slumped. Still breathing. Helena waited until the guards rotated until the wine passed between them and their eyes dulled. Then she moved like smoke across the ruins, silent and precise. She reached him unseen. Dropped to her knees beside him. He didn't open his eyes. Semel, she whispered. Nothing. Then, Helena? His voice cracked like burned parchment. I'm here, she said, cupping his face. I'm here. You weren't supposed to come back. And you weren't supposed to be so bad at dying. He gave the faintest smile. She kissed his forehead. His skin was ice. "I'm getting you out," she said. "No," he breathed. "You run. Now. Before they—" "I'm not running. Not this time." She pulled the dagger from her back. Began working at the chain. The lock was old. Ottoman steel, but rusted. "Who betrayed you?" she asked. Semel coughed. "Iskender. He's dead." Semel blinked. "Good." The lock snapped. She caught his weight as he collapsed into her arms. Then footsteps. Voices. Too soon. Helena stood, dagger in hand. And she whispered, "Then we die ourselves." Chapter 20, Dagger in the Silk Pavilion. Sultan Mehmed's war tent 1 hour before sunrise. Silk whispered in the wind. The Sultan's pavilion stood like a temple among tents, dark red walls stretched taut over a frame of carved bone and gold, guarded by 12 janissaries, each hand-picked for loyalty and silence. Inside, incense coiled like smoke from a dying god. Lanterns cast shadows shaped like blades across maps and relics. And at the center of it all sat Sultan Mehmed II, staring into the embers of his empire. He had lost the breach. He had lost the city's rhythm. He had lost Semel. And now he sat cross-legged on a cushion, sharpening a curved dagger slowly, methodically, while his advisors argued in hushed tones behind him. They say the fire wasn't sabotage, only miscalculation. They say the Janissary commander turned before the orders. They say Semel was a plant from the beginning. Mehmed did not speak. He only sharpened. Until the blade gleamed so brightly it reflected his face, too young, too furious, too tired. Then he whispered, "Bring her." Helena had not asked to be captured. She let them. Because to kill the Sultan she had to be close. So she walked into the pavilion with her wrists bound, escorted by 2 guards who didn't realize she still had a needle-thin blade beneath her tongue. She wore black. No veil. Her hair tied in a widow's braid. Her face bloodless but defiant. Mehmed looked up as she entered. He smiled faintly. "So the fox reveals herself." "No," she said. "The fire does." He rose to his feet. Not in anger. With curiosity. "You're the one who seduced my general. Sabotaged my breach. Danced between my guards and vanished like smoke." Helena didn't reply. "Who trained you?" he asked. "No one," she said. "You trained me. When your armies murdered my husband. When your generals sent my city warnings carved into corpses." His smile faded. She stepped forward, eyes burning. "You made me." Mehmed stared at her. Then gestured. The guards stepped back. He walked to a small table at the center of the pavilion. Poured wine into 2 silver goblets. "You know," he said, "you remind me of my stepmother. She tried to poison me with honey when I was 12. I learned then, never trust sweetness. Only fire tells the truth." He handed her the goblet. She took it. He raised his. "To the fall of empires," he said. She didn't drink. Neither did he. Then he whispered, "Where is Semel?" She smiled. "Closer than you think." That was the signal. From the hills above the camp, a fire ignited, an arrow dipped in oil shot from a priest's tower in the eastern wall. It struck a barrel. That barrel struck another. And suddenly, the false signal fire the Ottomans had waited for burst into the sky. Mehmed's eyes snapped toward the tent flap. Outside chaos. Trumpets blared. Horses shrieked. Officers screamed conflicting orders as squadrons scrambled to rally. And in the moment his attention snapped away. Helena moved. She spat the blade from her mouth into her palm, lunged across the table, and drove it toward his throat. But Mehmed, trained since childhood by assassins and tutors, caught her wrist mid-strike. The blade hovered inches from his neck. "You came to kill me?" he said, breathless. "No," she hissed. "I came to end your prophecy." And she twisted. But not toward his throat. Toward the map behind him, stabbed the blade into the parchment stretched across the table, slicing it through the siege lines he had drawn. He gasped, as if that wound on paper cut deeper than steel. Then Helena was tackled by guards. Dragged back, kicking, screaming, laughing. As the tent exploded into movement. And the city began to strike back. As she was dragged into the dust, her mouth bleeding, her arms torn, she looked toward the horizon. And saw Semel. Staggering. Sword in hand. Unchained. Surrounded by a half-circle of confused janissaries and burning wagons. Not dead. Risen. And she knew it. Even if they died here. Even if history buried their names. They had already won. Chapter 21, The Reflection That Changed. The inner courtyard of the great palace just before sunrise. It should have been impossible. Helena, bloody, bruised, half-dragged through the dust, should not have been alive. But chaos had cracked the Ottoman chain of command like a mirror dropped from heaven. Conflicting orders tore through the camp. Officers vanished. Fire spread from signal towers to siege stores. And in that unraveling, she slipped free. A dagger stolen from a distracted guard. A slice to the throat of another. And then escape through a breach in the commander's tent wall torn open by the collapsing ridge. She ran with the last of her strength. Toward the palace. Toward the final hour. Toward him. The great palace was in ruins. Not from battle yet, but from fear. Servants fled with heirlooms. Priests tore relics from the chapel walls. Scrolls burned in their own ink. The emperor had withdrawn to his private chambers. His guards, now reduced to shadows of former glory, defended the walls with half-empty quivers and broken pikes. But Helena wasn't here for the emperor. She was here for the chamber beneath the court, the room of mirrors. The one room in the palace untouched by fire or time. The one Seymour had once spoken of in a whisper when they'd lain tangled in ash and secrets. A room where you see not your face, he'd said, but the truth. She descended the spiral steps of the eastern tower. Her shoulder burned from an open wound. Her feet bled. But she kept going. Down. Deeper. Beneath the marble. Beneath the blood. And into the mirror chamber. A room of silence. Of stillness. Of echo. 12 full-length mirrors lined the walls, each made of polished silver, prized by emperors for their clarity, feared by priests for their honesty. Helena stepped inside, closed the door, and stared at the woman reflected back. But it wasn't her. It was Fatima, the courtesan. Lips red, eyes veiled, smile like a weapon. She turned her head and the reflection did not follow. Her blood ran cold. She stepped to the next mirror. This one showed Helena a helpless, broken, chained. She tried to look away, but she couldn't. Because in the last mirror, the one no one touched, she saw herself as she truly was. A widow with fire in her veins. A traitor to both thrones. A lover who'd burned her past to build a future. And a woman who no longer needed a name. The mirror did not reflect light. It reflected choice. And for the first time, Helena smiled. Behind her, a voice spoke. "Do you see her now?" She turned. Seymour stood in the doorway, barely alive, leaning on his sword, eyes ringed with soot, but standing. Still him. "I see all of them," she said. "And I choose me." He walked to her. She pulled him into the mirror's reflection. And for a moment, one brief, eternal heartbeat. The mirror changed. It no longer showed a courtesan, nor a traitor, nor a ghost, but a city. Whole. Unbroken. Not yet saved, but not yet lost. And in that reflection, they stood side by side. Not as pawns. Not as assassins. Not as seducer and spy. But as truth. Chapter 22, Constantinople Falls. The Walls of Theodosios, Sunrise, May 29, 1453. The city had survived 1,000 years. But this morning it bled. The Ottoman cannon crews had regrouped. The Janissaries, enraged and reformed, surged through the remaining cracks like water through fractured glass. Civilians screamed from rooftops as fire leapt from tower to tower. The great walls of Theodosios, once the pride of Byzantium, now split open with a deafening roar. And Helena was running. Not from the battle, but into it. The hidden tunnel beneath the monastery of Saint Saviour was collapsing behind her, stone groaning and ceilings cracking. Helena held a child in each arm, one screaming, one eerily silent, and shouted for the others to keep moving. Behind her, a procession of civilians stumbled through the dark, led by frightened monks holding nothing but relics and rope. "The vault exit leads to the cistern," she shouted. "Keep right at the first fork. Move." She didn't wait for thanks. She didn't look back. There was no time. They emerged into the ruined quarter just east of Hagia Sophia. And the screams hit like thunder. Smoke choked the sky. A woman burned on the steps of a chapel. 2 guards lay dead near the water gate, throats cut, swords still in their hands. Helena turned to the monk beside her. "Take the children. Get them to the sea gate. Don't stop." He nodded, eyes wide with terror. "What about you?" She pulled a curved dagger from her sash. "I'm not done." She sprinted through burning streets, limbs screaming, lungs raw. The city she had bled for, the city she had betrayed everything to protect, was crumbling. The Hagia Sophia loomed ahead like a monument to grief. And from within, the screams echoed. Women. Children. Refugees who had believed it was still sanctuary. Helena charged the doors. slipped inside, and saw hell. The marble floor slick with blood. Priests crucified against their own altars. Books burning. Soldiers breaking open relic chests looking for gold. And at the far end, behind a shattered column, a girl, crying, cornered. Helena didn't hesitate. She threw her dagger, burying it into the back of a soldier, dragging the girl by her braid, then ran, tackled the second attacker, and slammed his head against the pillar until he stilled. The girl screamed and fled into the shadows. Helena staggered to her knees, blood in her hair. And then, a familiar voice behind her. Helena. She turned and saw Semel, barely standing, face cut, arm useless, covered in dirt, ash, and someone else's blood, but still alive. He limped toward her and fell beside her, chest heaving. I told you to run, he muttered. I did, she said. Then I came back. They didn't kiss. They didn't speak more. They didn't have to. The cathedral groaned around them as a second wave of invaders pushed through the southern door. Semel gritted his teeth and stood. Helena rose beside him. Side by side, they faced the fire, blades ready. Two ghosts defending a dying city. Not to win, but to refuse to let it fall quietly. Chapter 23, The Escape Through Smoke. Eastern Quarter, Constantinople, mid-morning, May 29, 1453. The city was drowning in fire. The sky no longer existed, only smoke, thick and choking, poured through every alley and shattered dome. Constantinople's heartbeat slowed, but hadn't stopped. Not yet. Helena and Semel moved through the ruins like shadows in a dream. Every step was a gamble. Every street corner could have meant death. But they kept going, not for survival, not even for vengeance anymore, but because someone had to carry the truth out of the ashes. Semel leaned against her, bleeding through his tunic. His wound was worse than he let on. He had fought at the south steps of Hagia Sophia until he could no longer lift his sword, buying time for the last refugees to flee through the vestry gate. Now he limped, teeth clenched, sweat-soaked. You'll slow us, Helena snapped. You'll miss me, he replied, gritting a smile. She tightened her grip beneath his arm. I already do. They cut through the shattered library of the monastery of Christ Pantocrator. Scrolls lay trampled in blood and soot. The walls were painted with fire and scripture. Helena paused only once beside the body of an old monk who had died with an ink quill in his hand and the final line of a hymn half-written across the floor. Deliver us not into the fire of princes, she whispered. But Semel was dragging her onward. There's a tunnel under the spice quarter, he muttered. A friend waits there. He owes me his life. And if he doesn't pay the debt? Semel looked at her with iron resolve. Then I die collecting it. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind the ruins of a collapsed merchant house. Broken jars of cinnamon and salt had spilled into the street, mixing with blood and shattered bone. Two Ottoman soldiers stood watch nearby, arguing in Turkish. Helena didn't wait. She ran toward them, silent and sudden as vengeance, and drove her blade beneath the first one's ribs. Semel, teeth clenched, struck the second in the throat with the hilt of a broken spear. They fell. No mercy. No hesitation. The debt was rising. Inside the tunnel, they found the friend. A smuggler named Rami, wiry and suspicious, with a face like dried parchment and fingers stained with gold dust. He almost slammed the gate in Helena's face until Semel spoke. You'd still be buried in the dungeons of Edirne if I hadn't taken your place. Rami paled. Then let them in. The tunnel led east, beneath the outer wall, beneath the sea gate, beneath the last hope. They passed dead couriers, broken crates, the bones of things once human. And when the end of the tunnel opened, the morning light nearly blinded them. The sea waited beyond. And with it, escape. A skiff tied beneath the rocks. Small. Barely room for two. But enough. Helena looked back once. Back at a city she'd given her life for. A city that didn't know her name. And never would. I should stay, she whispered. No, Semel said, voice hoarse. You should live. She turned to him. You. He gripped the boat rail. I'll row. They pushed off just as the sky turned gold. Smoke curled behind them like the memory of war. The city faded, and the ghosts of Byzantium began to sink into legend. Helena pressed her forehead to Semel's. You owe me a future, she said. And he replied. Then I'll build it from the ashes. Chapter 24, The New Names They Wear. A village on the Dalmatian coast, weeks later. The village had no name on any map. Just a cluster of white stone houses nestled between olive groves and the sea where the waves whispered secrets to no one in particular. The war had never reached this far. No soldiers. No flags. Just salt, wind, and silence. And that was exactly why they had come. Helena went by Mira now. Semel called himself Darian. No papers. No questions. Just two strangers who arrived by boat one rain-washed morning and paid in gold no one dared ask about. They rented a small home by the cliffs. They tended a garden. They mended fishing nets. They were quiet. Invisible. Married. No ceremony. No priest. Just hands held in the dark, promises made in breath and blood, and a silent understanding that the past had burned and this life was all that remained. Helena kept the pearl earring in a wooden box beside the hearth. It no longer held messages or codes. Now, inside its hollow core, tucked gently behind the carved gold filigree, was a single thing. A lock of Nikeda's hair. Her first husband. The man whose death had turned her into a ghost. The man whose memory she carried not as grief, but as origin. She didn't cry when she touched it. She simply remembered. And then she kissed Semel goodnight. Because ghosts, too, can choose to stay. Some nights, when the wind rose and the sea grew restless, Semel would sit beside her, staring into the flames, his hand wrapped around hers. And when he looked at her now, he didn't see the spy. He didn't see the courtesan. He saw her. And she saw him. Not the general. Not the traitor. Just the man who had chosen her when choosing meant death. In this new life, there were no titles. Only the names they gave each other. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Chapter 25, The Letter History Burned. Somewhere in the Venetian archives years later. The parchment was brittle with age, its edges scorched, the ink faded to a stubborn brown. It had no seal. No signature. No royal crest. Just a single word scrawled across the outer fold in elegant, foreign script. Remember. The archivist who found it was young, more scholar than soldier, sorting through documents labeled confiscated correspondence, Eastern conflicts. Most were false treaties, outdated maps, and love letters never delivered. But this letter was different. It was written in Greek. The hand was feminine. The tone measured. Wounded. The first line read, "If you are reading this, then I have already been erased." He kept reading. "My name is not important. I have worn many. In the Sultan's court I was Fatima. In the shadow of Hagia Sophia I was a widow. To one man I was a lie. Then a weapon. Then the only thing left that was true." The letter spoke of a fire beneath the earth. Of two lovers who were enemies. Of betrayal on both sides. Of a war not fought for flags but for memory. And of a pearl once used to carry secrets that now held something far more sacred. A fragment of the dead. A memory with weight. You will not find us in the chronicles. We are not inked into kingship or martyrdom. But we were there when the city fell. We stood where maps bled and emperors wept. We held each other in the ruins and said, "Let this part live, even if the rest must die." The archivist looked up from the letter, heart pounding. He checked the date. No year. Only a place. Constantinople. He turned the page. But there was nothing more. Just a final line, written in smaller hand. "Burn this. And forget me. Or keep it. And know that once, for a moment, love turned history to ash." The letter was never filed. It was never catalogued. It was slipped into the archivist's coat, carried home, and read again by firelight. Then, it was burned. As she asked. The flames curled around the parchment. Smoke rose through the ceiling beams. And just before it vanished completely, he saw two words flash in the final ember. Helena lived, and she was never alone.
Across every empire, every forgotten age, stories still whisper. If this tale stirred your spirit, leave a like to honor the echoes of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice weaves a new legend into the sands of time. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Historical Fantasy Stories, where myths walk beside history, and every discovery changes the world. The next forgotten legend is waiting to be found.